Imagine walking through the fog-drenched alleyways of Victorian London, the cobblestones slick with rain, the gas lamps barely cutting through the darkness. The year is 1888. Somewhere in the shadows of Whitechapel, a monster is hunting. And the terrifying truth? No one ever caught him. No one ever truly knew who he was. Over a century later, his name still makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Jack the Ripper, the ghost of London's darkest chapter, the killer who looked the entire city in the eye and vanished. Welcome back to Echoes of Empire, the channel where history's most haunting stories are brought back to life. I'm your host, and today we are diving deep into one of the most chilling, most studied, and most debated cold cases in all of human history. This is not just a murder mystery. This is the story of a city gripped by terror, a killer who outwitted the world's most celebrated police force, and a legend so dark it has echoed across more than 135 years. Grab something to hold on to, because this one gets under your skin. To truly understand the horror of Jack the Ripper, you first have to understand Whitechapel. In the autumn of 1888, this East London district was one of the most desperate, overcrowded, and poverty-stricken neighbourhoods in the entire British Empire, which at the time was the most powerful empire on earth. Ironic, isn't it? At the height of Victorian grandeur, just miles from Buckingham Palace and the gleaming towers of British power, tens of thousands of people were crammed into filthy tenements, fighting over scraps and surviving by whatever means necessary. Disease was rampant. Crime was ordinary. Life was cheap, and that made Whitechapel the perfect hunting ground. Between August and November of 1888, 5 women were brutally murdered. Their names were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. These are the canonical 5, the victims almost universally attributed to the Ripper. They were working women, vulnerable women, women on the fringes of a society that Victorian England preferred not to see. And the killer chose them deliberately. He knew that in Whitechapel, a woman's scream in the night was not always answered. He knew the fog, the darkness, and the indifference of the powerful were his greatest allies. What separated these killings from ordinary Victorian street crime, and what sent shockwaves through not just London, but the entire world, was the nature of the murders themselves. The killer did not simply kill. He mutilated. The precision and deliberateness of the wounds suggested to investigators at the time, and to forensic experts studying the case today, that this was someone with at minimum a working knowledge of human anatomy. A surgeon? A butcher? A doctor? The speculation ran wild. Scotland Yard, then a relatively young institution, was overwhelmed. The Metropolitan Police launched one of the largest investigations Britain had ever seen. And still, nothing. Then came the letters. The police received hundreds of letters claiming to be from the killer, but 3 in particular have kept historians and criminologists awake at night for generations. The first and most famous was signed Jack the Ripper. That letter, received in late September 1888 by the Central News Agency, is where the name was born. The writer taunted the police. He promised more murders. He described his work with a chilling glee that turned the stomach of every detective who read it. Whether that letter was genuinely from the murderer or an elaborate hoax by a journalist looking to sell papers, a debate that continues to this day, it did one decisive thing. It gave the monster a name, and names, as history shows us, give monsters power. The murders escalated. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were both killed on the same night, September 30th, 1888, in what investigators chillingly called the double event. 2 women, 2 separate locations, within the span of a single autumn night. The city descended into full panic. Vigilante groups formed in Whitechapel. Residents barricaded their doors. Women refused to walk alone after dark. The newspapers, still in the golden era of sensationalist print journalism, fed the frenzy with every edition. And Scotland Yard, under enormous pressure, began making arrests, wrong arrests. Innocent men dragged in, released, dragged back in. The killer watched from the shadows and kept going. The final canonical murder, Mary Jane Kelly, stands apart from all the others. She was killed indoors, inside her own rented room at Miller's Court on the 9th of November, 1888. Unlike the outdoor killings where the Ripper was constrained by time and the risk of discovery, inside that room he had hours. What was left behind when her landlord's assistant opened that door the following morning was so horrific that seasoned police officers who entered the scene could not speak of it without visible distress for the rest of their lives. Mary Jane Kelly was the youngest of the canonical victims. She was 25 years old, and after her death, the Ripper was never heard from again. That sudden silence is one of the most debated aspects of the entire case. Did he stop because he was satisfied? Did he die? Or was he institutionalized? Did he flee the country? The theories are as endless as they are fascinating. Over the decades, suspects have ranged from a Polish barber named Aaron Kosminski, long considered by many ripperologists to be the strongest candidate, to Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria herself. Yes, a royal. The conspiracy theories around the throne run deep. Some researchers have pointed to a surgeon named Montague John Druitt, whose body was pulled from the Thames weeks after the last murder. Others have pointed fingers at cotton merchant James Maybrick, whose alleged diary, discovered in 1992, claimed to be the Ripper's own confession. That diary remains deeply controversial, with experts still divided over whether it is a genuine Victorian document or a clever forgery. In 2014, a businessman and amateur Ripper investigator named Russell Edwards published a book claiming to have solved the case using mitochondrial DNA extracted from a shawl allegedly found at the scene of Catherine Eddowes' murder. The DNA, he claimed, pointed to Aaron Kosminski. The scientific community was divided. Some praised the methodology, others questioned the chain of custody of the shawl and the reliability of the results. The case officially remains unsolved, and perhaps that is exactly why it endures, because here is what Jack the Ripper truly represents. And this is the part that goes beyond crime, beyond history, beyond the fog and the gaslight. He represents something deeply unsettling about the world we live in. He represents the failure of power to protect the vulnerable. He represents the way Victorian society, and in many ways societies throughout history, looked away from the poor, the marginalized, the forgotten. 5 women died brutal, terrifying deaths in the streets and rooms of Whitechapel. And the empire that ruled a quarter of the world could not catch one man. The city that prided itself on order, on civilization, on progress, was brought to its knees by a single killer lurking in the dark. That tension between the grand claims of empire and the grim reality on its streets is precisely what makes this story an echo that never fully fades. Today, Whitechapel has changed. The old rookeries are gone. The tenements have been replaced, but tour groups still gather every weekend to walk the same streets, peer into the same shadows, and feel the same chill that settled over this neighborhood in the autumn of 1888. Jack the Ripper has become an industry. Books, films, podcasts, walking tours, documentaries. There are those who find that troubling, who argue that the commercialization of these murders reduces 5 real women to mere props in a ghoulish spectacle. It is a fair and important criticism. When we talk about the Ripper, we must never forget that at the center of this story are 5 human beings, not just victims, not just footnotes to a killer's legend, but women with lives, with stories, with people who loved them and mourned them. Mary and Nichols had children. Annie Chapman had once been married. Elizabeth Stride was known for her quick laugh. Catherine Eddowes was fiercely intelligent. Mary Jane Kelly, the youngest, had talked of saving enough money to return home to Ireland. These were not shadows in a gaslit alley. They were real, breathing, dreaming people, and they deserved to be remembered as more than the Ripper's footnotes. So, who was Jack the Ripper? The honest answer, the only truthful answer, is that we do not know, and perhaps we never will. The files are cold. The witnesses are long dead. The streets have changed. But the legend persists because unsolved mysteries have a gravity all their own. They pull at us. They remind us that the darkness is real, that evil can move among us undetected, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the night keeps its secrets forever. That's the dark legend of Jack the Ripper, London's unsolved nightmare. A case that shook an empire exposed the fault lines of a society that worshipped wealth and ignored its poor, and left a wound in history that has never quite closed. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think, made you feel, made you want to know more, then this channel was made for you. Here at Echoes of Empire, we believe that history is not a dry collection of dates and names. It is the story of human beings at their most extraordinary and sometimes at their most terrifying. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment below. Who do you think Jack the Ripper really was? And share this video with someone who loves history as much as you do. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and remember, the past always has something left to say.